G'day and welcome. My name is Peter Anderson. I'm a friend of Jason Hill's. I'm featured on his channel, which is a bit strange for me to say, I guess, putting his engine together. So we've got a Cleveland, a modified Cleveland for his ZF Fairlane restoration. Now, there's going to be, I think, 3 videos. There'll be this one, which is all about cleaning, and cleaning is very important when you're assembling a new engine, and clearancing. So all about cleaning, measuring, putting the rotating assembly in, dial the camshaft in, and clearancing the valves as well. The next video will be the rest of the assembly, and the third one will be running the camshaft in. Jason might edit these so that there's only 2. I'm not really sure what he intends to do with it, but I'm indebted to Jason. Jason's retrimmed this XW behind me and the XC next to me, and the least I can do is help him along with an engine. So that's about it for me. So hope you enjoyed it. Now I use new Kmart white t-shirts, only because rags I've got here are never crisp white, and I want crisp white because I want to see exactly what's there. Incidentally, when you start brushing these out, the suds will disappear straight away when you first start because there's oil in there, or there's residue in there which is just killing the suds. But you know, after a while you should be able to wipe it in. Now see that? Filthy. That's nowhere near clean enough. The thing that's worth using on a clean bit of rag, wash your bores with thinners and check all around them. These ones look pretty clean now. You'll know it when that's got dirt in it, see? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do the other side. I'm going to come back, going to re-wash these out with thinner, do it again, and do it until literally there is no skerrick of grey on that white rag. More fresh t-shirt, more thinners, do it again. Should come out clean. I can see a slight bit of discoloration there. At the end of the day, what happens when you do this is there's still going to be some sort of residue elsewhere in the engine, right? Now, that in itself is no big surprise. We've got to clean out lifter bores or galleries, but still in the castings of the block there might be something hidden there that we don't know about. Now, that's disappointing obviously, but you have to get as much as you can. Anything visible has to come out. Now, this engine was sitting around for some time after the machine work was done. I think Jason did sort of body worked it and painted it. Clean block, spick and span. No problems there. So I'm happy. I'm going to go around all of them and do that in 3 or 4 different places. The other way you can tell when you start putting the thing together and you're putting pistons in and rotating it with the oil, if the oil starts getting filled with that grey stuff, you know it's not clean enough. What the hell is this here? That was never taken out. At least I don't think it was. We don't want that. I want to be able to get right through the galleries. That's not cool. Bit of carby cleaner. It's going to displace any water. And also going to do a bit more cleaning. Nice long brushes here for doing the oil galleries. Oh, nice and long. Different sizes. Now Clevos have a restriction around here somewhere. As we put it in the gallery, we can see it coming along the lifter gallery, and it's stiff there. Then it frees up again toward the back. Of course, it comes out the very back over there somewhere. So I don't know if maybe this one will go in. I think I've just got to go with that smaller one. Oh no, I can get it with that. Where's my carby cleaner? So it's just another thing to look out for. But it's one of those things that, these aren't my brushes, these belong to my brother. And I'm just firing it down the side of each. We're just going to make sure they're clean. Oopsie, get in there. You can see when you squirt it, it sort of rolls up in there, and that's good. And that's probably enough, you know, you're not sort of scrubbing and scrubbing and scrubbing, just make sure there's nothing in there. These are made by Moroso. Perfect. So we can really scrub the buggers out. See that muck that came out? We can see it coming out the bottom. Hopefully it doesn't affect Jason's paint. And we've got these ones too. And of course this goes down to your cam bearings. And they actually have restrictor kits for these on high performance ones to keep the oil in the main bearing. Right, so we've got the Welshies in, there's 6 on. We've also got in the gallery plug at the front here. There are 5 of those. There's the one on the side you just saw, and there's these 2 here. There's also 2 down the back. And the 2 down the back in the cam plug, there and there, I can't get in at the moment because it's on the stand. Now, one of the last things that was bought for this engine was a camshaft. So I haven't seen it rotating here. So I'm not going to put assembly lube on, I'm just going to put regular engine oil, just so I can feel it rotate. And once I'm satisfied that's the case, we can start thinking about putting the crank in. Don't forget, that's what we've sealed the gallery plugs with. And that's a recommendation from Speedworks. And they build race engines, so I'm figuring if they use it, we can. I think when using this sort of sealer, or any sort of sealer for that matter, this is on a new gallery plug, just putting it on the thread and then wiping it well away from the face. So as you're screwing it in, none of it's going into the gallery. It's sitting in the thread, and also it'll gather on the outside, and that way you can just wipe the excess off. Right, cam of choice is comp. Hang on. 270H. I think the one in my XC is a 260 or 262H. It's a little bit lumpier than mine. Let's have a look. We've got a handle to hold onto it to guide it in. This has never been out of the packaging. Here's a spec sheet on it. So, what's the duration? Intake's 519. That's actually like mine. What's the duration? 270. No, mine is smaller than that. I think the lift is about the same, but I think the duration's a bit less. So this might have a bit of a lope on it, but that's okay. Jason likes it, so you can. Nice big round lobes on it. Let's give her a bit of slip and see how she goes, eh? That'll trickle in. Now let's have a looky. We've got to be really careful doing this because, you know, we just do. This is why the handle's good, because you're not sort of hanging onto a bolt at the end of it with vice grips. Beautiful, mate. Mate, look at that. Just nice and slowly, and there's no binding, no catching, nothing. That is perfect. Alright, we can start putting the cranky in now. So it was a balls up yesterday with this. The card that came with the crank said it was ground 20-20, so 20 on the mains, 20 on the big end, and the bearings are all 10s. So I went back, we measured the crank up, turns out the card was wrong, and the crank has only been grounded 10 and 10. Now, main bearings, these guys, if it's got a hole in it, that's where the oil comes in. You do it like that, fried engine. So, I'm just going to put that in, level with that little protrusion. It'll also say upper on it, you can see there. Anyway, that's got a hole in it, nice and level there. Push it down and equalize it. Center one is thrust. That's where we take our thrust from. We just have to make sure, and if you're not in the mood to do this sort of thing, if you're tired or whatever, don't do it, because it could be a $6,000 mistake, or more, or less. And here's our thrust bearing, and that sits in the middle. And then we pop the cranking in dry, and that's always a bit nerve-wracking, that bit. Right, it's all sitting on the bearings. We don't rotate it for heaven's sake. Right, so here's the centre one. It's got a rebate around here so that the bearing can fit. The others are all flush. Bit of plastic gauge down on the journal. Arrow points forward. We put it on very gently. Now, there's a very small amount of oil in there, and it should screw down really easily. And then we torque it up. Now, this isn't the be-all and end-all, but it's an indication. And the best way is obviously the maths between, you know, the measurements and do your subtraction. The other thing is Clevos have a rebate in here that the bearings sit in. Make sure it's square before you nip it up. A lot of engines don't have that, like 4-bolt or 2-bolt, and they just sit flush on that machine surface, but these are actually stepped in. That gives it a little bit of a resistance to twisting. That's why 2-bolt Clevelands are quite strong. So it's 95 to 105. I'm doing 60, then I'll go full torque. And I've got my, this is on wheels, I've got my foot stopping it rolling. I've got no extension, so I want it right on top of what I'm tightening. Alright, we'll go up one more and full torque and check it out. Doesn't look too bad. So far so good. It can be a bit of a pain to wiggle off because you've got that rebate. Right, so on the side of the plastic gauge, we've all seen this. Inches, 1/1000, 1.5, 2 and 3. The general rule of thumb, a thousandths of clearance per inch of journal. These are coming up at 2/1000, which is perfect. That one's probably a little bit tighter. That might be closer to probably 1.7, 1.8 thousandths. That's all right. And we just go around and check them. And we also want to make sure, I don't know if you can see my hands in the way there, is it? And you can just use your fingernail to get rid of it. The other thing is, just make sure you clear off, and you can use your fingernail, it doesn't matter. And just give the journal a bit of a wipe with a fresh rag after you're finished. But just get rid of any of those remnants of the plastic. And everything has to be crack tested. Now with 351s, I'm not sure about 302s, but 351s, there was a batch of bad ones in 1977 which had annular cracks around them. I know that because I had one for the XC. That engine was out of a P6 LTD, and it was had a crack in it. So that's not good. It had several, so I ended up putting a 4MA in that, an American crank. The rest of the ones I've ever had crack testing, I've never seen one cracked. But 1977, yeah. And I think it was a case, Tony said, you know, look, for a stock build, or just off stock, it's probably going to be all right. But I wouldn't want to know it's in there if it was my engine. And I agreed. So that's probably holding up somebody's letterbox right now. Rear main oil seal, we've got a rigid sort of split type. Originally these probably shipped with rope type ones. And they're all right, they're just a bit of a pain. The reason I don't like rope ones is when you torque everything up, there's kind of an anvil of sorts that goes in there and you tighten it up and it pushes it all into those sort of areas and have a tiny bit protruding and it all butts up and seals and all this, but it also makes the crank really hard to turn initially. And so when you're doing your piston fitting, checking your bearings, you really want it to spin freely so you can feel exactly what's going on. Now I'm going to fit these, put the crank in with some lube, torque it all up and spin the crank, and it should spin free as a bird. So we'll take these out. I'm going to cut that so I don't distort them. Now if we look at this, that's the sealing surface there around the inside. If I put that way, that's correct. If I put it that way, oil's going to get straight past it. We don't want that. So it goes this way. Okay. Now the other thing is, it's not a bad idea to have it protruding like that. And the reason is you haven't got that join along the same path, if you like, as where the journal goes. So that's the way that fits in. I'm going to put a tiny dot of 3-bond on each end, and I'm going to lubricate it. On the back of this main, there's a pin in there. It's got a spike on the end of it. You knock it back and put this stuff in. Assembly lube. Now we don't want lubricant. I'd be amazed at how many times I've seen this. People putting lube on the back of the bearing shell. It's ludicrous. You don't do that. It just goes on the front. The back has to be dry. This stuff is claggy and glaggy and all sorts of stuff. I went around the side there because this is the thrust one, remember? And we'll put it on the thing as well. And all it's doing really, because I'm going to be rotating this quite a few times, is it's going to prevent any scuffing of bearings while we're rotating it to assemble it. But once we're ready to start it, we're going to run the oil pump to flush new oil all the way through the engine. Okay. Also bear in mind, some bearing kits have 2 sets of bearings with holes, so both uppers. Some of them, these are solid at the bottom. That's one, we're facing forward. That guy goes there. I'm just going to put a tiny bit of 3-bond on the end of that gasket. I don't want it spreading out onto the crank, so I'm only using a tiny bit. That's got to find its seat. Right, so I've done the first torque to 65. Just make sure it rotates nice and smoothly. It feels, there is resistance there, but that's all that assembly lube. But that's nice and smooth. There's no binding whatsoever, so I'm going to torque it down to the 100. We'll have a look at the rings. I'm actually going to 105. Well, the camera's in the way, sorry. Because that's the maximum the book says. This is a Warren & Brown torque wrench. Let's go and double check those and we're good. I'm just going to turn that crank a bit. Right, Jason's got here some Hypertectics. These are 302 rods with a high pin height. The idea of these is they get you to hang around top dead center and a bit longer, it gives you more torque. There's no arrow at the top. Arrow always points forward, but there's no arrow on the top. What we have though, a good thing to remember, is the bottom on the big end is chamfered on one side, not on the other. That chamfer faces the edge of the journal. So that piston goes like that. Yeah? It's number 1. This is where we are here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 across the bottom. That's chamfered edge, always against here. That'll give you the right clearance between here as well, which we need to check. I've also got to check the thrust bearing clearance as well. But before we do anything, there's 3 sets of measurements on the rings that I want to do. Now I'm not using the Ford manual for ring end gap. I used to just, 20 thousandths be fine. They use an example here that the gap factor is 4 thousandths. Therefore, 4 inches multiplied by 4 thousandths, or 4 multiplied by 4 thousandths is 16 minimum ring end gap. This is devastating if these butt when they heat up. It just destroys everything. You can pop a crown on a piston, muck up your bores, everything. There needs to be expansion room in there. Sorry about that noise next door, they're building a house. Now, what we've got here, we've got street, but we've got Hypertectics. So the factor is 6.5. 4 times 6.5. Yeah. 4 times 6.5. We're looking at 26 thousandths of ring end gap, so we better go and check that. I'm going to write that down actually, because I'm bound to forget. 0.026. Positioned too well for this. I'm just going to squeeze things together. Put it in the bore. Yeah. Get the piston in. Square it up. If that was square. Was it square? Right there. And we're sniffing for 26 thousandths. Let me just get that. Just a minute. It's tight, but it clears. Alright. Good. And I'm even checking the oil. Why not? I don't want any chance that this thing's going to go nuts. That looks quite a bit bigger actually. Yeah, it is. A couple of things. You'll notice top ring is silver, second ring is black. That's because that's moly, that's cast. Cast rings are kinder to an old bore. They're softer. These are better on a new bore. They seal better. There's a marking that'll signify which is top. There's nothing on that side. There's a dot there, so that means it faces up. And same applies for this. The dot faces up. Now, a couple of things. We need to check the clearance between the ring and the piston, and we also need to make sure the ring is not going to protrude past the surface of the piston. Because if it's poking out, no good. Okay. Keep them in order. The only rings I've measured are the ones that are out of the packaging. So let me just check against that sheet, because the sheet will go into all of it. The side clearance is 1 to 3 thousandths. Easier once the ring's actually installed. That's 2 thousandths. It's probably, as I said, maybe better to do when the ring's installed. Perfect. Awesome. There we go. This guy here doesn't want to be butted up. Or sorry, overlapped. It has to be butted up. So they always have to be butted up. And these blokes go either side. I've got the big end bearings sitting on the big end. Normally you'd leave these on. I've just left them off to show you. There's a proper plastic tool you can get that straddles the journal, so you don't scratch it. There's just a bit of fuel in it. It'll sit over there. So when I knock the piston up, it's not going to mark up that journal at all. Again, I'm just using a rubber tipped hammer underneath that. And I'm going to have to clearance, and again our chamfer is on the outside. Yeah? There we go. You hear it stop. Take those off and we'll plastic gauge that as well. These are ARP fasteners, industry's finest. These rods, because new bolts were put in, have to be resized. That is sort of honed to make sure they're all fitting and everything's right with them. So I'll torque this up, take it off and check the clearance. That is perfect. Alright. So I've just got to lower them down and put assembly lube on the journal and the... I'm not very clean there. On the journal and the bearing. Just push them down a bit. Just put some assembly lube in there and we're good to go. I'll just check that it's rotating properly, which it is. Beautiful. Now I'm going to do sort of 1 and 5, 2 and 6 like that. I'm not going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 because I just want to check clearance in here and so forth. That looks a bit dirty there. You know, that's doing what it's supposed to do so far. We're only very, very early on in the game, but we're being careful. I'm concerned about this end gap. I spoke to Tony and he said 25 is plenty. I made a measurement before and I wasn't happy with it. But there's 25 there and it's tight. Like, it does drag through, but it's probably closer to 24. Thereabouts. So, check every gap. I'm even checking these all ones as well. Well, they're huge. I just don't want any chance at all that there's going to be something wrong here. Beautiful. Right, well, rotating it after every piston conrod's been fitted. Our entire rotating assembly is in. There's no binding. There's a bit of friction there because they're new bores and so forth, but it's smooth. So next bit, a little bit of clearancing. So 10 to 20 thousandths between here. This is the reason you need to get those chamfers on the edge. That's 15, that goes in alright. 23 won't. 23 is the wear limit. Perfect. That won't. I'm just going to turn this around. The other thing we've got to check is thrust. It won't go in. That goes in. Alright, so that's cool. We've got enough clearance between these. Hell of a lot of heat in these areas here. Of course, they're going to expand a bit with heat anyway. There's a lot of heat generated in that action here, which needs to be kept cool. Thrust is the other thing. I think it's only about 4 thousandths. Let me just double check that. Here's the next one. And I'm just going to put that's 5 thousandths, and that's got drag on it. The spec is 4 to 10 thousandths. That's perfect. A couple of ways to dial a cam in. We've got to find true top dead center, which I've already done. There's a whole video I've done on this stuff on the XC when I did that engine. This is, you can use a stop, go against the stop one way, take a measurement on the wheel, go right around the other way until it hits the stop, take another measurement, find the average, the difference, and you're good. That'll find true top dead center. 2 ways to dial it in. We can check, that's what I've been doing now, that's why I'm all over the place. Check when the intake's opening, when it's closing. The other way is intake centerline method. So we're going to go to maximum lift, which is there, then back off 50 thousandths, take a measurement. We've got 59 degrees. I'm just going to write that down. 59, and then we're going to go around this way to the other side of the lobe at 50 thousandths. If you have to back off, you've got to go back around again to take any slack out of the chain. And we've got 152. So I add 59 is 211. Divided by 2 is 105.5. And the intake centerline is 106 on this cam, I think. I think. Where did I see it? Oh man, where is it? Hang on, well. Oh, goodness me. Lobe separation. Oh yeah, intake centerline is 106, so I am dead on the money. I'm running a degree advance on the cam, 2 degrees advance on the crank, 1 on the cam, because it's obviously half the amount. And I reckon that's perfect. Absolutely perfect. There's no slack in the chain. If it is, it's undiscernible, and we're good. Perfect. Okay, so it's time to have a look at a few goodies, and we'll start with these lovely Edelbrock cylinder heads. And here it is in all its glory. Beautiful work. The only thing I don't like about non-standard heads is the fact they're branded, which, I mean, it's Edelbrock, so it's going to be branded, right? And the fact they don't look stock, but the workmanship in these is beautiful. Screw-in studs, we actually took it out to size up the rollers. They're huge. They're bigger than 3/8. I'm assuming they're 7/16, so coarse on the cylinder head size and fine on the rocker side. So I'm just going to pop that in and screw it down. They're a single valve spring with a damper and also a set of guide plates. I've actually asked Jason to get hardened push rods for the guide plates, just on the off chance we chafe them and whatnot. Porting's beautiful. These things will flow better than a 4B. And of course, on the underside, 219 intakes, 171 on the exhaust, I think, and sort of semi-quench. So beautiful piece of kit. What I do need to do though is locate number 1, which is an intake, that guy, because I'm going to be putting some soft springs in that I can push off the degree wheel kit. Look at this, beautiful, aren't they beautiful? 173, which is the standard ratio, and they're absolutely gorgeous. So anyway, yeah, getting back to it, I'm going to take the springs out and put some softer ones in so I can clearance. Just make sure when I put this on the head, on the engine, sorry, it's clearancing properly. And we'll put it in without a gasket. A gasket's going to give us 40 thousandths, about a millimetre of room. I want to check it without, and we're shooting for 100 thousandths clearance. So we have a bit of rod stretch and stuff at full tilt, so we'll take it off and have a look. So we've got gorgeous, aren't they? Right, so we just pop these on, get our retainers, and put the locks in. You can just do it by hand. I just hope it doesn't fly off, because then it would be bad. I've got a cloth under there. And this one. And they fit actually quite snug. There we go. So we've now got a situation which is really easy to push the valves in. And plated a whole lot of stuff. He does what I do. But I've had to go through, this is all intake manifold stuff, I've had to go through and find the oil pump bolts because I'm sort of cleaning them up at the moment. And I've got all of his, that's not it, is it? I better double check, that's not it. I want to put the pan back on it just temporarily. And because the engine's all dirty, all clean, and these are dirty, I'm just going to sort of rinse them out in a bit of garage thinner, just so when I put them on, they don't dirty up the block. Right, if you're like me and you like playing with engines, they have to be kept clean. You can buy engine bags. I think Moroso make them. They're quite thick plastic. I just use council bin liners. And this one's got a bit of oil in it. I was going to chuck it out. They're, what, $3 or something? They're not much for 10 of them. They're the 240 litre ones. And as I said, this one's got a bit of oil, it's assembly lube and that sort of thing that sort of falls to the bottom. But I'll just chuck it out and use a new one. I've not yet put the oil pump on. I'm just going to wipe along here just to catch any of the muck or the lubricants that come out. And I'm just going to pop the sump on for now. But it's only temporary. As I said, we've got to clearance we've got to put the oil pump on. And we've also got to clearance the oil pump drive against the crank weight, because I've got to using a much thicker AOP one. And the other thing we need to do is to check the strainer clearance to the bottom of the pan. So these are just quarter courses. I should have used the bloody 5/16 one there, would have been easier to get to, wouldn't it? Actually, a comment on Facebook. I think I sent a photo of Jason once I put the rotating assembly in, and someone commented that it had been zero decked, and it hasn't. The fact is, this is a 302, it was a 302, a 351 crank with 302 rods. 302 rods are longer by, I think, 1/4 inch over 351. One's 5.78, that's the 351 rod. I think 302 rods are 6.02. There's about 1/4 inch in it, not much. So because of that, this is a hyper-eutectic out of a build that I'm doing for the XA, which has been in the box for too long by the look of it, hasn't it? But what this means is that the piston's shallow. It's more like an LS piston than this. There's less room, right, for the thing to reach top dead center and stay there. There's actually effectively less room. So what it means is the pin height's higher, and therefore you need as much deck room as you can get. Now, Tony didn't tell me this, but I'm assuming this engine hadn't been rebuilt, so it was on its original timing chain, you know, the finger one and all that sort of stuff, and the fibre cam gear and everything. Doesn't look like it had ever been apart. Original bearings, Ford ones, everything from 1973. He hasn't taken much off. He's just lightly skimmed this. So taking too much off will be a big mistake on an engine like this, because you need as much deck room as you can get. Now, given that he's only taken a tiny bit off, and you can see by the staining around there, around where the jacket's wearing everything, he's not taking much off. And this isn't exactly accurate, but I'm coming up with, I'll turn that around to double check. I'm coming up with, where are my glasses? I think it's 9 thousandths. 5 thousandths. There's 5 thousandths room. That's not much. 10 thousandths is 1/4 of a mil. So an 1/8 of a millimetre of room. So it's effectively like it's been zero deck, but of course it hasn't. This is going to give quite a high compression because it's only got one valve relief, and it's got, you know, the Edelbrock heads and everything. So I'm not expecting, when I see this, I'm not expecting there to be much room in there at all. It's probably going to have a compression ratio up around 10:1. Hopefully not too much high. He's going to be running on 98 or whatever. But just for those who are curious, it's not been zero decked. Not a bad idea to stick a new set of these in. They're just located for the head gasket and the cylinder head. Sealed, you know, and they just sit in these locations. I think probably shouldn't use a steel hammer, but I just did. There we go. They're just an interference fit, so they're a split ring. We'll get some studs, ARP of course. I better clean these threads out. That doesn't feel as clear as it should. Yeah, I might just run a tap in there. That one's not too good. Now these have a, I've got these on the crank and the XW. They have an Allen key, sort of a receptacle at the top, but you're not supposed to tighten them up. You're supposed to leave them just hand tight. I'll just double check that. We're not tightening this up, we're just, hang on, can I see the, where's the stud? There's one. Just gonna let that sit down. Why isn't it sitting down? Just a minute. Oh, there we go. That's better. Lubricants and all sorts of things when we torque these down. I'm not doing that at the moment. I'm just clearancing. There's also 10, 20 washers too. I'm assuming there's 2 per thing. I need to check that, but for now it doesn't matter. As I said, I'm just clearancing. And ARP stuff is just beautiful. It's so smooth, easy to torque down, and it just feels accurate, you know. I'm sure it is. But I think they're perfect, particularly on heads and cranks. I have gone for standard ones with mine though, because I like the stock look, which are the standard bolts. They're not torque to yield on these, they're just torque them up and walk away. The engines are very old designs anyway. So I'm just going to get it with a ratchet. It doesn't matter, there's no gasket there. All I'm looking for is clearance on these 2 guys. I've set the lash up, but the lifters have bled down. The main thing I'm worried about, there's plenty of clearance there, is when the exhaust valve starts coming down to the pistons chasing it back. We're hitting there, but that's all there is. There it is there. And then it disappears. Yeah, that's not even close. That's where it starts to hit there. But there's ample, and then it's gone. So that's it for this one. We've got the rotating assembly in, everything's clearanced, everything's done. We're ready to assemble the rest of the motor. So hope you enjoyed that. Take good care of yourselves and I'll see you soon.